Lesson 5 for January 25 to 31, From Pride to Humility, read by Dr. Percy Harrold. Wednesday, January 29. Lifting Eyes Toward Heaven. Question, read Daniel chapter 4, verses 34 to 37. How and why do things change for the king? Daniel 4, beginning at verse 34. And at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, and praised and honoured him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand or say to him, What have you done? At the same time my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom my honour and splendour returned to me. My counsellors and nobles resorted to me. I was restored to my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honour the King of heaven, all of whose works are truth, and his ways justice. And those who walk in pride he is able to put down. God allows Nebuchadnezzar to be stricken by a strange disease, but eventually he readily restores him to a sound mental state. Interestingly, everything changes when at the end of the 7 years predicted by the prophet, the ailing king lifts up his eyes to heaven, as we just read in verse 34. In Prophets and Kings, page 520, we read, For 7 years Nebuchadnezzar was an astonishment to all his subjects. For 7 years he was humbled before all the world. Then his reason was restored, and looking up in humility to the God of heaven, he recognized the divine hand in his chastisement. In a public proclamation he acknowledged his guilt and a great mercy of God in his restoration. End of quote. No question, great changes can happen when we lift our eyes to heaven. As soon as his understanding comes back, the king gives evidence that he has learned his lesson. But this story is not as much about Nebuchadnezzar as it is about the mercy of God. The king has missed 3 previous opportunities to accept the God of Israel as the Lord of his life. Such occasions are available to him when he recognizes the exceptional wisdom of the 4 young Judean captives in Daniel chapter 1, when Daniel interprets his dream in Daniel chapter 2, and when all 3 Hebrew men are rescued from the fiery furnace in Daniel chapter 3. After all, if that rescue doesn't humble him, what will? In spite of the ruler's stubbornness, God gives him a 4th chance. Finally, wins the king's heart and restores him to his royal office in Daniel chapter 4. As the case of Nebuchadnezzar illustrates, God gives one chance after another in order to restore us to a right relationship with him. As Paul writes many centuries later, the Lord desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 4. We see in this story a powerful example of that truth. So to finish the day, what are ways that you've been humbled by God? What did you learn from the experience? What changes might you need to make in order to avoid having to get taught the lesson again? This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind and Hearing Impaired, Christian Record Services for the Blind, the Sabbath School Department, and Hope Channel. You can also listen on the official Sabbath School 4 app and the Apple iTunes app, Sabbath School with Percy Harrold. Remember, God is always faithful.